Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Jim K. Ford Sens Nation podcast. It is Steve Warren along with the coach, Greg Kennedy, decked out today for your YouTube viewers in his Slave Lake Ice Dogs jersey. Is that a real jersey or just one of those fan ones?
It's a T-shirt that looks like a jersey. It's kind of cool, actually, don't you think?
That's a pretty strong logo. I always like the logo on the color scheme for sure, kind of Tampa Bay Lightning. Solid look out of the gate. You know what? I was thinking we should talk at some point about some of the CBA changes, one of which is making a change for the players and not having to deal with a dress code as they make their way from the bus into the arena. I'm sure you coached minor hockey teams at competitive levels. You did lots of AAA teams and such and junior clubs that probably had to wear jacket and tie here and there. So how do you feel about that?
Well,
Whether it's minor hockey or the NHL level, and I kind of ask it from the perspective of you and I show up for work here looking very much like we're going to a sports bar.
well, I'll tell you this. My thoughts on it, like with minor hockey, my thought always was you either do it fully or you don't do it at all. My thing was you had dress shoes, you had black dress pants, you wore a belt. There was no white socks. There was no ankle socks, like get a proper pair of socks, and you wear a shirt and a tie and the team jacket and no ball caps. That's all in. I mean, you see teams where the guys show up in jeans and running shoes, but they're wearing a shirt and tie. And my thought always was, if you're going to do it, you do it fully. And I would always leave it up to the parent group and say, in a minor hockey scenario, that is, this is expensive. You're buying a pair of shoes for a 17-year-old, 16-year-old kid, and, he's going to outgrow them in less than 6 months. Do you really need to buy another pair of shoes? Maybe they don't have dress pants, whatever. So I would let the parent group decide. The players were always, I could say this, any team I ever had, always wanted a dress code. And to the point that I'd even say for when we go to a tournament, play a game before 10 in the morning or any morning tournament game, I'd say tracksuits is the dress code. And half the players would be like, I don't want to do that. I want to wear a shirt and tie. So I'm a all in or not in at all. As far as this NHL thing goes, I don't know. Could get crazy, couldn't it? I can't wait to see what some of these guys are going to come up with.
Well, you've seen some of the fashion choices of, say, Leafs captain Austin Matthews, for example. Like, what do these guys start showing up like Kramer from Seinfeld in the episode where he's got the Technicolor coat and the big hat, and people start mistaking him for a pimp? If they start, I'd still like to see some level of dress code, like, you're going to a golf course or something like that at the very least. Don't go crazy on this, but I never really cared about it one way or the other. Until Hockey Night in Canada started showing them coming from the bus, I don't know why they always bother with that. It's, they're always kind of a throwaway B-roll thing, but suddenly Don Cherry interpreted that as in they're walking past every fan on the way to the game. Like, nobody sees them coming from the bus to the locker room, so really does it make a big difference at the end of the day. But let's get into some Sens talk here. I apologize. We have things all mapped out, and old Stevie just takes us right over here, right out of the gate. Alex Formenton in the news. Formenton has signed on with the same Swiss team that he was playing for kind of in the interim between the Senators and the start of his court date. And it is Ambry Piotta, I believe. Not that that really matters, but he has signed a 3.5-month contract to play for them because he is an RFA. His property playing rights are owned by the Ottawa Senators. And so this sort of affords him the possibility to maybe latch on somewhere, whether it's Ottawa or somewhere else in the NHL, if they decide to move his rights by that December 1st deadline where all RFAs have to be signed on. And I guess the big picture issue is he didn't retire after all, Greg.
Yeah, strange. I thought he was all set to go off and work in construction. But I guess he needs a paycheck, right? He needs to make some money, and he's probably got some legal bills to pay. And what he does best is play hockey. And from what I understand, the team and they were in constant contact. The team apparently the fans loved him. The team was happy to have him, and the team wanted him back. So would you turn it down? Probably not, right? If somebody came along and offered you a gig that was right up your alley, you're doing what you do and what you love to do, I don't blame him for taking it. I think it's an interesting thing, though. He's the first one now, right? He's the first one of the 5 who's actually now we know is going to be playing somewhere this season. It'll be interesting to see now what happens with the rest of them, especially Carter Hart.
Yeah, that's the question now, because right now all 5 are still, by rule of the NHL, ineligible to play in the National Hockey League. So it's a non-starter to talk about where so-and-so might end up until the NHL lifts that. And we saw that was, say, for example, Joel Quenneville. He was not able to seek work, but he was available. Like the NHL reinstated him quite a bit of time, many months, maybe even a couple of years, not sure, before he actually got the job with the Anaheim Ducks. So what say you? Will the NHL reinstate these guys at some point this year?
I think at some point they will. There's pressure from the Players Association, among others, out there saying, "Hey, like they've been cleared. Get on with your investigation." The NHL keeps saying they're conducting their own internal investigation into things and deciding what kind of supplemental discipline they want to put on them. But I think the interesting, there we go again, right? The interesting thing, we keep going with that. But I think that let's see if somebody signs somewhere else as well, right? Like if somebody, I think they can sign in the American League. I don't think they're not allowed to play in the American League or the East Coast League or something, or even a senior A team or something. Like if Carter Hart thinks that he's going to be able to play and help a team and wants to make sure that he's in shape and playing well, he's going to want to be playing somewhere as soon as possible, right? Even if they can't play in the NHL, these guys are going to be looking to play somewhere to get an opportunity down the road. Like in the middle of the season, are you going to want to sign one of these guys and he hasn't been on skates or playing anywhere? So I think it behooves the players to go ahead and find somewhere where they're legally allowed to play, a la Formenton, and see what kind of shape you're in come, I don't know, 3 months from now or 2 months from now or 6 months from now or whenever, when the suspension of the NHL is lifted. These guys want to be ready to go.
Ready for the big game? Your home should be too. With Celebrate Lights, you can show your team spirit and light up every victory. Sync your lights to your team's colors and let the whole neighborhood know when they score. Match your team's colors, celebrate every win, and take the excitement to the next level. Celebrate permanent holiday lighting, the easiest way to set the stage for unforgettable moments.
So, are you ready to take your Ford ownership to the next level? Look no further than Jim K. Ford, introducing Ford Pass, your passport to a world of convenience and control. With Ford Pass, you're in control like never before. Start your vehicle remotely, lock or unlock it from your smartphone no matter where you are, receive instant alerts about your vehicle's health, and schedule service appointments with ease. Ford Pass puts you in the driver's seat of your car's maintenance. Plus, enjoy access to exclusive perks and rewards, earn points on vehicle purchases and service visits, and redeem them at your discretion. Their dedicated team at Jim K. Ford is here to assist you every step of the way. They make Ford ownership a breeze. So why wait? Visit Jim K. Ford today. Experience the future of driving with Ford Pass. Visit them at 1438 Uville Drive in Orleans or online at jimkford.com. This is one I think that you and I can probably get into better than most podcasters out there because, well, we were kids when this guy was great, and teenagers even. Ken Dryden passed away this week at the age of 78 due to cancer. I didn't even know he was ill, as opposed to, say, Guy Lafleur a couple of years ago. We'd known he'd been ill for quite some time. I had no idea Ken Dryden was even ill, but I don't know. When I'm watching on Saturday night as a little kid, or when I'm sifting through my hockey cards at Richmond Public School, I don't know that there was a name or a player that fired me up more than Ken Dryden's. And part of that 70s dynasty, fabulous goaltender, Hall of Famer, and just elite, whether you're talking about his time with the Canadiens or the Canadiens, he was an absolute beauty, and I was saddened to learn of his passing this week, Greg.
Yeah, it just kind of hammers home how old we're getting, eh, Steve? Like you suddenly realize that more and more of our heroes, our mentors, our parents, people we look up to, are starting to go. And in this case, it's 70s hockey players, right? More and more going in the last little while. My most vivid memories are watching him play with the Habs. Obviously, the first Stanley Cup run there when he got called up from Cornell. just stood on his head and led the Habs to his first of 6 cups. Like, he was something to watch. I often wonder, and the conversation's been had, could anybody have played behind that team? You know, I've read articles on both sides of it, and a lot of people talk about the brains of Ken Dryden and the intellect of Ken Dryden, and the way he approached the goaltending. And I don't know that anybody could have come along and done what he did. Like, the man was he was very, very good. This just in, he was very good.
Yeah, listening to Larry Robinson's comments. I think it was Dave Stubbs who writes out of Montreal. He got all the old Canadiens teammates, Yvon Cournoy, Larry Robinson, I think maybe Guy Lapointe in there as well. Anyway, he had comments from a lot of his old teammates, and Larry Robinson, for one, said, yeah, I mean, people sort of talk that way every once in a while, but there's no question that there were a lot of nights when that Montreal team relied heavily on Ken Dryden. Like, they couldn't believe that he had kept them in the game, and then they'd have a chance to win at the end, and generally they'd be able to turn it up at that point. So I think it's an equal mix. I mean, obviously, if Ken Dryden played for the California Golden Seals, he doesn't have the record that he has and the stats that he has and the respect that he has, but it all works out. You know, that's just a tremendous goaltender. And I think the game I think that, I mean, it was a Summit Series. I was a little young for that one. I remember watching it with my dad and how into it he was. So because I worship my dad, I was into it by osmosis, and we had a big scrapbook with the Ottawa Citizen, just pages and pages of all this Team Canada coverage. The Toronto Star we had as well, Globe and Mail. We're getting it all together, and we kept a neat old scrapbook, which unfortunately I lost track of a while back, but it was great to have. But the game, though, and it's coming up to the 50-year anniversary this year of the Soviet Union Montreal Canadiens 3-3 draw on New Year's Eve. If you're of a certain vintage, and Ken Dryden backstopped the Habs that night against Vladislav Tretiak, you probably regard that as one of the most exciting nights of hockey of your life.
That was a great hockey game. I remember watching it. I also remember more of 72 than you do. I guess I was 8. But yeah, that Russia game at New Year's Eve was something else. That's the same year, of course, of the they're going home. That was the same year, right? The same tour by the Russians in 76. But what a hockey game! And the Russians only had like 15 shots on net or something like that. It was crazy. And yet the pace of the game, the skill on display in that game, it was something to see. And Dryden being the main man for Montreal, keeping it the way it was.
Well, and Tretiak was out of his mind.
Right.
He stopped everything. And I recall that whole tour. It's hard to describe to someone who's, say, 30 years old and just knows about it rather than living through it. Like the Soviet Red Army, and you think about the Cold War, and you think about, we just assume that Canada's the best in the world all the time. It's a little different these days with the Americans being so good, the Finns winning a lot, the Swedes. It's obviously different now, but back then, here's the Soviet Union in the midst of the Cold War coming in and doing what they did in the 72 Summit Series and almost defeating us. And then they do this tour 3 years later with a lot of the same players. To hear some of the dialogue from the NHL players as they got ready for what's supposed to just be a simple exhibition tour. I still remember Fred Shero, the Philadelphia Flyers head coach, saying that before the game against the Soviets, he said, I believe if we win, I'm going to be sky high, and if we lose this game, it's going to be worse than dying. And you just don't hear that kind of dialogue, even in the tens of millions of dollars that players are making these days. You don't hear that kind of dialogue so much today anymore, but that's how important that whole series was, and that Ken Dryden backstopped Montreal Canadiens 3-3 draw with the Soviets was probably the crown jewel in that whole thing.
And that was really his last big moment. I mean, there were cups after that, obviously, but that was his last big international moment, even though he was playing for his club team at the time, because he was injured and didn't play in the 76 Canada Cup and allowed Rogie Vachon, who wasn't even initially invited. Rogie Vachon ended up being the star of the 76 Canada Cup, and the Russians didn't even send their best players. There was political problems. They didn't send their best players. So really, that's New Year's Eve 75, or what was called the 76 Super Series at the time. That was what Ken Dryden's last big international moment, and stood up and was accounted for.
I didn't know that about because I knew Dryden dealt with back problems. Scotty Bowman called it. He's not sure what it's called these days, but he called it tall man's back. Was how they actually gave him. That was the diagnosis at the time.
I think it was a knee.
Oh, was it a knee at the time? But he did have back.
I think it
problems.
was a knee.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's interesting.
Well, look at his crouch in the net. Look at his stance. Like, yeah, gee, no wonder he's got a bad back. Some of those pictures, how low he gets, he was bent down a long way. No wonder his knees and back were probably bad. No wonder he had to stand up so straight and the hands on the stick. Yeah, he's trying to get his back to loosen up a little in net there.
Yeah, here 50 years later, though, goaltending coaches must just laugh at what they were doing back then. Okay, so let me get this straight. You're 6'4" at a time when NHL goalies were usually around 5'10", 5'11", and you basically mitigated all your advantage by bending over at the waist, like you're. I don't know. I don't want to say the pose looks like, but you look like you're posing and maybe presenting even. But yeah, it was a very strange thing. But he had back problems as a result of that, and it's kind of interesting that Ken Dryden's entry into the NHL came at the expense of Rogie Vachon. He came in as a rookie, and Vachon was their incumbent, and he's basically outplayed him to the point where Vachon was traded to the LA Kings. So in '76, it's kind of there's Vachon getting a chance to get Dryden's spot this time around. So a bit of symmetry there, I suppose. Sad news that Ken Dryden passed away today or this week at the age of 78. A couple of other things as we start to land the old plane. Max Guenette, according to Post Media's Bruce Garriock, may be on the trade block. I believe Bruce's line was the expectation is that Steve Staios may try to trade Max Guenette. And I guess that's nothing against Gwinnett. He was the Belleville Senators alternate captain this past season. He's been a good soldier for the organization, got into 8 games with the Senators at the NHL level, and he's been good down in the minors, but he hasn't exactly been banging doors down, demanding a spot on the NHL roster. And now you just got a numbers game, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. It's a position of strength now for the Belleville Senators, not necessarily the Ottawa Senators, but in Belleville, right shot defenseman, you've got Lassie Thompson, you've got Yakimchuk, you've got Crotty, who just signed. There's another one whose name I never remember, but you do. So Gwinnett is it's a position of strength, so maybe you can trade him. Nobody's trading this guy for an NHLer. Nobody's trading him for a second-round pick. But you look at your roster in Belleville and think, okay, we could maybe use a second-line left winger or a third-line centerman or something. So there's an opportunity here for the Belleville Senators to make a trade from a position of strength to acquire something that will help their forward group and help that be a better team in Belleville. And it makes perfect sense from that standpoint.
The guy you're missing is Jabril Toure, 6'7" right shot defenseman. And they basically have 8 guys under contract, 4 in the NHL and 4 targeted for Belleville at the moment. In the NHL, you've got from the bottom up, Matt and Paolo, Spence, Artem Zub, and Nick Jensen. And I suppose if Jensen, if his injury, his hip injury and surgery takes him deep into the year as far as when he's back, or if he comes back and he's just not the same player, then I'd say maybe put the brakes on moving Gwinnett out. To have a guy with a little NHL experience ain't a bad thing. But for now, with 4 guys in the NHL and Gwinnett would be 5 down in the American Hockey League, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And numerically, and I know that Steve Staios has said on a number of occasions, you can never have too many right shot defensemen. They may have too many right shot defensemen now. So I think they might.
Well, there's a difference between the NHL team. You can never have too many right shot defensemen. In the system, guys playing in the American Hockey League who are really not going to be NHLers, or if they are, they're 7th or 8th defensemen. In case of Max Guenette, like I said earlier, it's a position of strength in that case, and it's a possibility to bolster your roster. I really think that if anything's wrong with Jensen, you've got Matt and Paolo, and then Thompson's around too, so or even Yakimchuk if he makes it. So if Jensen's not there, they'll be fine at the NHL level. It's just strictly a trade of a depth position player at the American Hockey League level, and hopefully they if they're really going to do something, hopefully they make this happen before training camp, so whoever it is can get in and spend training camp acclimating to Belleville and the systems and be ready to go with them for the season this year.
There might be those of you watching and listening saying, well, they do have an ECHL affiliation this year with the Allen Americans down in Allen, Texas. They didn't have any affiliation last year, so they'll have to get a roster going down there. But the reality is, for the most part, guys on NHL contracts, they like to minimize the number of those types of players that are down in the ECHL. It's usually one or two, but that too is an option if they decided to re-sign Max Guenette. And that would be the way I was leaning until I saw Bruce's note. I would have thought that, it never hurt. Like they said, can't have too many right shot defensemen. And I will even say organizationally speaking as well. But hearing Bruce say that suggests that maybe they've decided to move on from a position of surplus and maybe in a trade, because you're not getting much for Max Guenette. The guy cleared waivers to go down to Belleville last year. In all likelihood, Greg, you're probably getting a guy of equal impact who just plays another position that you're not operating at a surplus position.
Bang. Exactly. Yep. Exactly my thoughts.
Okay. All right. Couple more things. Scott Gomez in the news.
Really?
Scott Gomez of his 13 games of Ottawa Senators experience. So I'm going to go ahead and call him a former Senator here in the second week of September. You might not get that out of me once the season starts, but here we are. Former Senator Scott Gomez has been named to the American Hockey Hall of Fame. It is not from his time with the Ottawa Senators, but the guy did win. He did win the NHL Rookie of the Year award. He did win 2 Stanley Cups with the New Jersey Devils, and he does have a pretty funny YouTube channel. So in he goes.
There you go. Yeah, well, it makes sense. You're right. Storied career, decorated hockey player, Team USA veteran, played with the Rangers as well, played in New Jersey, New York media coverage. So, yeah, that makes perfect sense. He'd be a U.S. Hall of Famer. I would agree, wouldn't you?
Yeah, he's the first Alaskan in there. Hasn't been many Alaskans who've gone in.
From Alaska. I forgot that.
Yeah. And in the last 2 lockouts, first, you had the one in 04-05 that wiped out the entire NHL season. Then you had the other one around 2012. He played for the Alaska Aces, his hometown team in the ECHL those 2 seasons, and he was their league MVP in that 1 year that he played with the Aces in the wiped out season. So I thought that was a fun bit of trivia. And again, worth checking out his YouTube channel because he's flat out silly in that.
All right.
After his career was over, he became a New York Islanders assistant coach for a couple of years. Then took a little time off and then did this YouTube channel about life in Alaska. It's got all these skits. He's a pretty good guitarist and singer and does some NHL interviews as well. Great interview with Martin Brodeur he does while the two of them go out for a day of golf. So, yeah, it's I believe it's Life at Scotty's House, I think it is what it's called. So congratulations to Scott Gomez going into the American Hockey Hall of Fame. With that, we'll call it a day. The former Slave Lake Ice Dogs head coach. Any final thoughts today?
No, Steve.
All right.
We're all. You know what? I mentioned to you. I'm going to pick a book to read, and we should talk about it next week. And what we've talked about today, I think I should read. Maybe I should read the. There's a book about the game on New Year's Eve. There's a book about the Flyer game, and there's also a book about the whole series that year of all the teams the Russians played against. I think I'm going to pick one of those 3, and we can talk about it next week, how what I learned from it. How's that sound?
Are these new books, or are these just like books that have been gathering dust for
within the last couple of years? Like I have a lot of books. I have a lot of books. I just noticed Game Change is over here. That's a Dryden book, isn't it? Where is it? There it is, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that it right there? Anyway, yeah, no, they're a mixture of a few years ago to present day.
Now, you mentioned...
Yeah, I just think it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, it would, and I look forward to that. And we'll probably set that up as a separate playlist on our YouTube channel. So, but you bring up Game Change, and it also brings up a Ken Dryden story that relates to the Ottawa Senators. Because Game Change is all about the story of Steve Montador and concussions in the NHL and CTE. And specifically about Montador's case, but there have been many cases like that one and other suicides and things like that have occurred, sadly, because of CTE cases. And so at the end of an interview that JR and I did with Ken Dryden, I would say it was 2017 when that book came out, and I write about this in the Hockey News this week. At the end of the interview, he brings up the Clark MacArthur case, because this is just a few months after the Sens went to the 2017 conference final, right? And
Right.
MacArthur had just finished 2 years in a row where he played only 4 regular season games because of his concussion issues. Okay? And then in that 2017 playoff run, he suddenly played all 19 games. All 19 games after he'd only played 8 games the prior 2 regular seasons. And at the end of that 19-game run where he played every playoff game, he never played another. By the time October, November rolled around, Pierre Dorion saying things like, yeah, we think he's probably played the last game of his career. And Ken Dryden, because of his interest in CTE and concussions and such, was basically holding JR and I account, basically. You guys are prominent Ottawa hockey media members here. Why aren't you guys holding the Senators to account for this? Like, it has all the earmarks of a situation where risk was taken, where permission was given. And I don't know the backstory behind any of it, but probably we should have dug a little deeper. And but that was Ken Dryden in a nutshell, right? He was a guy that he wouldn't mind asking the hard questions because he believed so deeply in player safety.
Cool, eh?
Yep.
It makes you think. I remember him being out for so long. I remember that playoff run, but until you just said it, I did not remember that he didn't play another game.
Yeah.
So obviously, like, was he really good to go? Should he really have been playing? Those are the kind of questions that Ken Dryden thought that you or other members of the Ottawa media should have been putting to the Senators or even to Clark MacArthur or to the team doctors or whoever. Like, was this guy really 100% healthy? Should he have been playing? And has there been any detrimental effect, long-term problems to Clark MacArthur since then?
I don't think so. And I think he's golfing up a storm and enjoying life. But in the moment, I think the reason we weren't asking too much about it was, he had to come back at some point. Again, he played 4 games in 2015-16. He played 4 games in 2016-17, but he did it in the 4 games before the playoffs and then played in the playoffs. And then the interview occurred at a time where we didn't know he was going to retire, because I think that's the most damning thing at that stage of the game.
Yeah, right.
When he basically plays 19 games out of the blue and never plays another one and leaves the game at age 32. So that was where that came from. And so an Ottawa Senator tie-in to the Ken Dryden discussion. I was starting to wrap up the program, and then I got all sidelined. I apologize to that. We have a lot of NFL to watch because we're recording this on a Sunday afternoon, so we're going to get to it. In the meantime, I'll tell you this, that the Hockey News page is right there with all kinds of cool Sens articles. It's thn.com/Ottawa. I'm the site editor over there, which is why I'm always browbeating you and reminding you about the Hockey News Ottawa. And the other thing is that our website is sensnationhockey.com, where you can find all our past episodes very easily and details about us and how to contact us and things like that. Greg, enjoy your evening, and we will talk to you in our next episode.
For sure. Thank you, Steve.